Here we are back again. I need to go over a few more things with you so we can really come together on Monday and Tuesday and look at the brain and the body systems as a whole. Remember, I start from the lowest with the neuron and work up to systems. And so today I want to talk about the nervous system. Before we get into that, I realized I didn't go through this last slide on brain plasticity. And brain plasticity, remember I had told you that we basically are born with the neurons that we are going to have. Well, sometimes we can have trauma, typically, that happens when the brain can modify and kind of rebuild itself after there's damage to the brain. So there's a ton of speculation on this. There's been study after study, and then reversals of studies that have done that we do grow new neurons. But that's not exactly the full story because we're still finding out. We know so very little about the brain. But we see that if there was something that happened to the brain and then, for instance, paralyzation happens, the brain can kind of like retrain it. And in a later chapter on memory, we'll talk a lot about the hippocampus and the motor cortex. But we see that the brain can kind of like retrain itself to start making different neural connections. And this is what's kind of known as brain plasticity. It works really well in children. So if a child suffers some traumatic injury and they can't walk, it's really easy for a child to, not really easy, it's much easier for a child to learn how to walk than it would, say, an adult. But it doesn't mean that adults can't regain some of that skill or movement or whatever it might be after an injury. And here's a picture of Gabby Giffords. Gabby Giffords was a state representative for the state of Arizona. She was out doing in front of a supermarket, doing a kind of a campaign, if you will, and somebody tried to assassinate her. In fact, did assassinate several people. One of them was a federal judge. One of them was a little 9-year-old girl. The bullet that he shot at Gabby Giffords went through her brain. She suffered severe brain damage, but as you see, that's a picture of her now. She has since retired or resigned from the U.S. Senate, or U.S. Representatives, but she has made incredible progress, and that's because of brain plasticity. Okay, so now let's move on to the nervous system. I love this kind of like, where can I put myself? There, I'm going to put myself over there. I love this kind of like picture that it reminds me of like a fish or something. So if you look at that picture, you see the brain, and there's the spinal cord, and then there are all the nerves coming off of the spinal cord. So when we talk about the nervous system, we're going to break it down into two parts: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, the CNS and the PNS. I hate saying that, PNS. The central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So we'll start with the central. The central nervous system is the part of our nervous system that links all of like our receptors, muscles, glands. It's what takes all of the messages and sends it links it all together. The nerves link the central nervous system with those receptors and muscles and glands. Now, when we talk about the central nervous system, there are types of neurons. Remember I talked to you at the very beginning about types of neurons. We mostly focused on what a motor neuron looked like and how that behaved, but there are 3 types of neurons, and you definitely need to know this. There are sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. Now, I guess I could have probably put that in a different order, but let's start with the sensory neurons. Sensory neurons are the types of neurons that carry message from the tissues to the brain and spinal cord. So what I mean by that is sensory neurons are kind of like the touch and the taste and the smell and the hearing and all of those senses that bring in that message. So if you think of sensory neurons, think of it like I like to do like this neuron dance. Maybe on Monday and Tuesday when you come, we can do the neuron dance. So think of the sensory neurons as like bringing in the information. Now, this is where I said maybe I could have done it in a different way, because once that information is grabbed from the sensory neurons, it has to link it. And then it's going to go up the interneurons. And the interneurons are what go up through the brain and spinal cord. It kind of intervenes. It's the gateway, if you will, look at that picture, up the spinal cord into the brain. So the interneurons are what are working in the brain and spinal cord. Kind of, if you think about the back of you, up to your brain. And then we have the motor neurons. And the motor neurons are the types of neurons that get this message. Remember, like when I kept saying like the neural communication, get this message to carry it out, to actually do it. So it takes the message from the central nervous system, from the sensory neurons and the interneurons in the central nervous system, and forces it to do something with it. It makes it act. So if it's walking, if it's drinking a soda, if it's driving a car, picking up a pen, like any action that your body does, it's the motor neurons that take care of that. So think of it this way. Okay, I'm going to do a little dance here. All right, so think of the sensory neurons. Oh, I'll get right in the view. The sensory neurons are bringing in this information. Now, it's more than just touch. It's all the sensation information that can come in. But the sensory neurons are bringing it in. The interneurons are going up your spinal cord to your brain. And that's where they're going to be sent out. This message is going to be sent out to the motor neurons. The motor neurons need you to move your arm or scratch your chin or whatever it happens to be. Whatever action think of like that motor has to do. It has to move. It has to act. And so this is part of the three different types of neurons, sensory, interneurons, and motor neurons. Now, one more thing that I want you to add. Sensory neurons on your AP exam, I'm probably not going to do it, but it's a good bet on your AP exam, they're going to refer to sensory neurons as afferent, A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T. Can you see the board? Afferent neurons are known as sensory neurons. Efferent, E-F-F-E-R-E-N-T, are known as motor neurons. And if you understand how the English language works, afferent means to, efferent means away, the A and the E, like affect and effect. So remember, sensory neurons, afferent neurons, motor neurons, efferent neurons. Okay, moving on. So the peripheral nervous system. So we have the nervous system, right? Well, the central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. But then we also have the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system is it's everything else. Think about on your peripheral view. Your line of sight is right here, but the peripheral view is what's on the edges, on the fringes, right? So if the central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord, then the peripheral nervous system is everything else. It's all those other nerves. And the peripheral nervous system is broken into two components: the somatic nervous system, and that controls the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, and that controls the glands and the internal organs. Now we'll talk about those words here in a second, but it's more of the involuntary, if you will. The somatic is more of the voluntary, because think about the skeletal muscles, unless you have like a muscle twitch or something, but you would control your muscles. Think about lifting weights and, doing curls for the girls type thing. So the peripheral nervous system is broken down into the somatic and the autonomic. Pronounce that correctly, please. Autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is even further broken down. The autonomic nervous system is broken down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Now, remember, the autonomic is, think of the word autonomic like automatic. It's involuntary. You don't really get to control that. So the autonomic nervous system is further broken down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the sympathetic nervous system, and we're going to talk about this a lot, over and over and over again, so make sure you really understand the autonomic. The purpose of the autonomic nervous system for the sympathetic system is to like get you ready, the fight or flight. Remember when we talked about like norepinephrine and how it gets you like ready to go? The fight or flight response. For the sympathetic system, that's getting you ready to fly. Like you are moving, you are aroused. The parasympathetic system is what's going to calm you down, which is what's going to kind of relax you back. So we absolutely need both. We need the sympathetic system because when the time is right, when you have to act and you have to act quickly, you need all of those levels to go up. You need your heart to increase. You need to start sweating. You do not need to digest food. Like that's the last of your worries. And so you're going to use this big burst of energy, which is good because think about in like a very tenuous situation, how quickly you would have to respond. You don't want your heart to be like, just poking along. Like you need to be on high alert. But you can't be on high alert all the time. If you are on high alert constantly, well, you're going to have like a heart attack and die. So then you're parasympathetic. Once the threat has ceased and you are, think about if you've ever been in a accident or if you have ever just like narrowly escaped getting in real trouble or something like that where you were like, and you got really scared. And then think about later, after the fact, when you finally started to calm down. Think of the word parasympathetic. Look at the word para. If you were a paramedic, you are going to help somebody in an accident. You're going to help them calm down. You are going to help them be safe. This is what the parasympathetic system does. They bring you down and calms you down to conserve your energy, decrease your heartbeat, lower your blood sugar. Now your digestion will start back up again because your digestion has to happen, but not at those real critical moments. So these are constantly going to be with in tandem with each other. Both are going to work to keep us in a steady internal state. That word homeostasis that I used the other day, to keep our bodies like perfectly balanced. Sometimes they have to be up, which is a good thing. We want our bodies to react quickly if we need to. But then sometimes we need to bring them back down. Because if they're up for too long, we're gonna stroke out. But if they're too low, we're not gonna be able to respond and we're probably gonna die because of the injury or the trauma or whatever it happens to be. So we want both to work in tandem. So this is the last thing I'm going to show you. I want you to kind of think of this chart. I'm going to bring it a little bit closer here. Okay, here we go. So I want you to think of the nervous system as like one big chart, right? Like this is the title of the nervous system. Can you see that? All right, so at the top of it, it's going to be the central nervous system. Remember, we have two parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, the CNS and the PNS. And remember, the CNS is the brain and spinal cord. And the PNS is everything else, all those other nerves. Okay? So the CNS and the PNS. And then the PNS is what's broken down further. This is in the autonomic the somatic. And the autonomic, think of the word autonomic like automatic. It just happens. And the somatic as like the voluntary. You control it. All right? So I hope you can see that. And then in the autonomic, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And remember, the parasympathetic system, that's what's going to calm you down. That's what's going to decrease everything, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your pulse, your breathing, all of that. The sympathetic nervous system is what's going to get you amped up. That's what's going to get your body ready to act and behave and keep you safe from harm's way. So I hope you can see that. I want you to really understand that. Oh, I can't figure this one out. There we go. The nervous system, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Autonomic, somatic. Parasympathetic, sympathetic. All right, that's it for today. I hope you come on Monday and Tuesday with questions, and we will talk about how to make these all work together. See you next time. Bye.